Hello and welcome to our Friday webinar. We are on with Dr. Stephanie Lamb. Welcome, Dr. Lamb.
Hello.
And I'm sorry, who is that with us today? It's
We've got
not
Maureen today.
Maureen the
Yeah.
African Gray. How is
Yep.
Maureen? She's like looking down at you like
Oh, she wants to be part of this today.
yes, but she's giving you like a very, I guess, intense gray stare. Is that what they
Yeah.
All right. Because she knows she knows what the topic is today. We're going to be covering what your vet needs to know. So she's like, what do they need to know? You tell them. You tell them. um, all right. Yes. So this would be an interesting webinar. This is coming from someone who's in the trenches. Like, you know what people should be telling you. So now we'll know what we should be telling you.
Right. Yep. All the stuff that we want to know about that helps it make us know what to do for your birds.
Okay. That's good to know. And I'm sure you've had so you don't want people coming in there silent, like just like, here's my bird and I'll come back in an
That's
hour.
difficult.
Right.
I mean, we can deal with it, but at the same time, you really want the owner of the bird to be there, because there's so much little details and stuff that we're relying on owners to be picking up on at home, because birds are prey species. They like to act like everything's fine, and when they come to the office, there's many times that birds do not do what they were doing at home in the office, because they know they're somewhere weird and they don't know who the people are around them. They don't want to be touched. They don't want to be bothered. So they're going to act like everything's okay, So having an owner give us all the details of everything going on at home really helps guide us to know what's going on and what we need to do.
Yeah. I'm gonna imagine you have like, while we let people log on. So I'm just gonna imagine you have people, you have birds that are gonna come in there and they're gonna be quiet as like, so silent, completely silent. And then you're gonna probably have the ones that like when they get nervous, they talk. Like, do you get like the opposite, like hello, like an Amazon or something, like just
Yeah, sometimes they get just really excited and just nervous excited, and you'll have an owner say, oh, well, they never do that at home, like in regards to how excited they get, whether it's the vocalizations or sometimes they're attempts to get away. They may try to like fly somewhere, where at home they're like, oh, they never really fly much at home, but here in the office they're like, yeah, I'm ready to leave, and they try to check themselves out.
Oh my gosh, I can just imagine that. That's a lot of flapping, a lot of wing flapping going on sometimes, I'm sure. So all right. So I made you a co-host because I'm
Great.
sure you always have these great presentations, so that makes it easy on us, so we don't have to take like extensive notes. We could just go back and rewatch what you showed us earlier. So
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let me share my screen here so that we can get our PowerPoint up. All right. And this, let's see. Oh, there it is. So we'll begin our talk. And for this one, Avian Vet Insider, it's what your vet needs to know. And again, as we started off, we were saying how we ask a lot of questions because we really need to get to know what's going on, to get to the root of problems with your bird and know how to best help your bird. So there's several things that we, want you to think about before you come into the office, so that you come in prepared, come in knowing what to expect a veterinarian to be asking you about. And sometimes, I've had owners sometimes say to me like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was going to be this many questions, or I didn't know this was such an interview. And it's not that we're trying to intimidate anybody. It's not that we're trying to judge anybody either. Sometimes some of the questions may sound judgmental, and they're not meant to. They're just questions that we are asking so that we can try to place ourselves in your homes and get an idea of what's the environment like, what's going on, what is it that you're seeing. And so it can be a lot, but having all these questions answered really helps us understand what's going on. So things that you'll what you need to know before you go, you need to know the problem that the bird is going in for. So, what is it that you're seeing? We also are going to be asking things about the diet. We're going to be asking things about the housing. We're going to be asking about medications. We're going to be asking about any previous medical problems, and just a couple of other little things about the home and the little intricate details. And let's say, for example, you are an owner who for some reason can't bring the bird in yourself. If you're asking somebody to bring the bird in for you, like a family member, maybe you're working, or maybe you're sick and you can't come to the office yourself, or maybe you're out of town. Preparing anybody who is bringing the bird in to have all these answers is really important. There's been plenty of times where we've had somebody else bring the bird in that wasn't the owner, wasn't the primary person taking care of the owner. And when we started to ask the questions, they go, I don't know, they just told me to bring the bird in. And, that makes it a little bit more difficult, because again, back to the fact that birds are great at hiding signs of illness, great at acting like everything's okay. We can certainly do our physical exam, which is very important for helping us to understand, the health status of the bird and what's going on with the bird. But certain things are not going to pop up on the physical exam. Certain little things, like, well, if they're eating more, or they're having more water in the droppings, like, I may not see that while they're in the office, and so knowing that information is really helpful. So we're going to get into like the nitty gritty of all this stuff. So when we're looking specifically at the problem, like, why is this bird coming into the office? The thing that I want to be asking about is, well, whatever this problem is that you're bringing the bird in for, how long has it been going on? So I know you're bringing it here today, the bird here today, for me to see the bird, but how long has it been going on for? Has this problem been going on for just the last 2 hours, or has this problem been going on for the last 2 months? There's different things I'm going to be thinking about, problems that could be present based on how long the issue has been present for. When did you first notice it? Was this something that maybe you first noticed it like several months ago, and then it kind of went away, and then it came back, and now it's been going on for a certain period of time? Having that duration of time really lined out and explained for us is super important. Another question that I often ask is, people will often come in and say, hey, I'm bringing my bird in for, let's say, vomiting. I'll often say, okay, well, when did it start? How long has it been going on for? And then I'll say, well, has there been anything going on before the problem started, or around any changes around the time that this problem started? Because that can then prompt an owner to go, okay, well, let me think about that. Yeah, maybe we've been vomiting for the past 5 days, but you know what? 7 days ago, we gave them this new food item, or this particular thing changed in the house, or this other behavior was seen that I really didn't think anything of until now that you're asking me it. Oh yeah, there was something else going on. So some of these questions are also geared to like stimulate people to think about more stuff, because I know that when I come to the doctor for myself, if I have to go to the doctor, I could potentially get a little nervous going to the doctor and thinking, okay, here's what I'm coming in for, but kind of forget about all these other things that are going on, and all the other like little signs and symptoms that maybe led up to a problem. And those little signs and symptoms can be really helpful to figure out what's going on. So trying to think about all those other things, and us as the veterinarians asking you guys, the owners, all the little details around it, is really trying to stimulate you to think of anything else that could have happened that could be a contributing factor to what we have going on. And then another question regarding to the problem specifically is, how has it progressed? Has this been something that, okay, you noticed the problem and it's sort of stayed the same the entire time that you've been noticing it? Has it gotten worse? Did it start off really, mild, and now it's actually gotten substantially better or worse? Or has it gotten better? Is it something that, you first noticed the problem, it was really bad, but then over the last couple of days, it's gradually been improving? That progression is really important for us to know what is going on. Okay, the diet is a really important thing for us to be asking owners about. And this is one where I think sometimes people think that we're judging them, and I promise it's not that a veterinarian is judging you. It's that the veterinarian is just trying to find out what's the bird eating. We need to know what kind of foods the bird's taking in so that we can understand more about their health state. We know that nutrition is so important to all different animals' health. And we know that there's been a lot of nutritional problems that we've seen in birds throughout the years. And so knowing what kind of diet a bird has helps us to know, could part of what's going on be something that's nutritional in origin? Is it something as maybe easy as a slight dietary adjustment to be done to help this bird do better? Or, sometimes there's certain diets, certain things in the diet that may work well for one individual, but don't work well for another individual. And it's important for us to know all the different stuff that this individual is eating because, is there something that's unique or different to this individual that maybe we don't want this one to be eating a particular thing because of other underlying problems or what have you. So in regards to the diet, questions of what is the diet that's offered? And I want to know the base, like, is this patient getting pellets? Are they getting seeds? Are they getting table foods? And by table foods, what are the table foods? The word table food means something different to different people. Sometimes table food is just this very vague term. Anything that's not pet food, so no like pellets, no seeds, you're talking about everything else. So some people consider table foods to be your fruits, your veggies, pastas, grains, and some people consider table foods to be things like processed foods that maybe we're eating. The bird's also having maybe a Twinkie with you, which we hope they aren't. What does the word table food actually mean? Varies from one person to the next, but I want to know not only the base diet, but all those other things that are offered as well. I mean, for example, here, this is Ema, this is my macaw. She's actually chewing on a little piece of mallow. Mallow is it's a type of weed, actually, and it's safe for them to eat. That's not a typical part of her diet, but hey, I let her chew on it, and so she does ingest a little bit of it. So that's something that, no, she's not eating that every single day. She is not having that as like base part of her diet, but it's in there. She chews on it, she ingests some of it. So I would include that as, yeah, occasionally she gets certain greens, and here's one of the type of greens that she may get, I also want to know what quantities of different food items are being offered. So like, okay, if you're feeding your bird your basic diet of pellets and seeds, let's say, how much of it is pellets? Like what percentage of the diet is pellets? Is the pellets like 80% of the diet? 80% of what the bird takes in? Or is it, yeah, you offer it, but the bird only gets 10% of the diet as pellets? That's important to know because there is a difference, how much percentage of nuts do they get? How much percentage of fruits do they get? Birds can get fruits. Fruits are great, but maybe we don't want fruits for all of our different species out there to be like 90% of what they eat. It would be too much. So knowing the quantities of those different foods is helpful. Again, what are the treats? What are the other little things that are offered in the diet? Are we getting nuts as treats? Are we getting seeds as treats? Are we getting, again, those table foods from people as treats? Crackers, chips, French fries. I mean, honestly, there are a lot of people who do offer these little treats that no, they're not getting those things all the time. Maybe a bird gets a French fry like once a year. Is that going to be a problem? Probably not, but it's good for us to know how often this bird gets this thing, because again, going back to like, what if we have a bird that's coming in for vomiting? And okay, here's the base diet that it gets these pellets, it gets these seeds, it gets these fresh items, and then it gets this treat of, let's just say, a French fry. And what if it just recently got that French fry treat and that normally doesn't get that treat, but now it's causing vomiting and irritation for it because for that bird, it was a little bit too much, so it may seem like a tiny little thing, but it is helpful for us to know. And then the real big question, here's all the stuff that is offered. Here's all the quantities it's offered in, but what does the bird actually eat? Because you can offer the best diet in the world, or what we think is the most balanced thing for a pet parrot. And the bird may not really eat it. Birds are great at picking out things that they want and discarding things that they don't want. So although you may offer these healthy things, what is the bird choosing to eat? What is the bird picking out to eat? Are you the kind of person who has more of okay, this is sort of the amount of food I'm going to feed per day, and therefore the bird's going to eat pretty much everything? Or are you the kind of person who's going to just offer a plethora of different things, and it's a little bit more buffet style, and they get to pick? Maybe one day they do good about eating all their pellets, and maybe the next day they do poorly about eating all their pellets, or what have you. So what does the bird actually eat of what's offered is really important as well. And it can vastly be different from what is offered. So an important question that veterinarians often will be asking. And it sounds redundant, and I think, again, sometimes I feel that owners have sometimes been like, why are they asking all these questions? I just answered it. If this is the diet that's offered and what's the bird actually eat, of course it's actually eating what I offered. But it is important because sometimes those two things are completely different. Continuing on with the diet, what is the water source for the bird? Is the bird drinking from a water bottle? Is it drinking from a bowl? Those are both perfectly acceptable things to be drinking from. But where is that? If it's a bowl, where is it placed in the cage? Could the bird potentially poop in it? Could the bird potentially put food into it? Does the bird like to put food into it, or water, or toys into their water? There are some birds who just like to play with their water. It's fun, and that's fine. They can play with their water, but if they are, it's important for us to know, because, well, then they're going to be a little higher risk, maybe, if they're putting food items and toys and stuff in their water, that maybe there could be some bacteria that overgrow in that water easier than in a bird's water source that doesn't do that sort of behavior. Bottles are perfectly fine. Many people will train their bird to drink from a water bottle. It's thought to be a little cleaner because you then don't have the option for a bird to dunk its food or its toys or poop in it. So it stays cleaner. But on the opposite side, sometimes those water bottles malfunction, so you need to make sure that they're functioning okay. And I can think of a time where a bird came in who was trained to drink from a water bottle, but it had gotten, like, the little dripper thing had gotten clogged, and the bird came in acting sick. The bird was very dehydrated, and that's all it was. It was just that it was dehydrated because it wasn't able to get to the water to come out of the little dripper because it wasn't functioning appropriately. And I mean, those things can get dirty too, so it's not that they're necessarily 100% the safest thing to do because of cleanliness. They also can become contaminated with bacteria or fungal things. So they need to be cleaned just as much as bowls need to be cleaned, which then brings me to the question of, how often are they cleaned? Are they cleaned daily? Are they cleaned once weekly? Are they cleaned when the owner sees it get dirty? And if that's the answer, that it's when the owner sees it get dirty, well, when does the owner see it get dirty? And so there may be some more probing questions for that. Because yes, as I've already mentioned, you can have bacterial and yeast overgrowth inside of water sources, and birds can get sick from that stuff, just like we would if we were to drink some dirty water. You have the potential, and that's not a guarantee because we have immune systems that fight things off, but we have the potential to get infections just like birds do. And the next question is, does anyone else drink from the water? What I mean by that is, like, number one, is it a single water source for one bird, or is it like a flock of birds that are able to get to that water source? Who else is in that flock? What other species are in that flock that could potentially be drinking from that water? And then also, I mean, sometimes there's birds who are climbing off their cages and going to walk across the kitchen to the dog or cat's bowl of water and drinking out of there. Are the birds drinking out of that? That's important for us to know. If we have a bird that is drinking out of the water from another pet, even though it's not the primary water source for the bird, it still is important, because you know, a dog drinking out of a water dish is getting a little bit of saliva in there and potentially some bacteria in there. And again, do we want the bird to be exposed to that? Probably not really too much. And that's important for us to know if the birds are doing that. And then really I put the picture up here of again, Ema, my macaw, drinking out of a Starbucks coffee cup. And that brings the question of, do they drink anything else other than water? Do they drink things from us humans that maybe aren't really meant for birds? Now, I will tell you, in this photo, I did actually have water in that cup, so it was good opportunity to shoot the picture. But I mean, how many people have had their birds walk over to them and get interested in whatever it is they're drinking? And depending upon what it is we're drinking, sometimes it's okay. You know, like teas, certain types of teas can be okay for birds. It's something that I wouldn't necessarily recommend it all the time. There are teas that are specific to be used in birds, and if something that's something you're interested in, you know, something you could talk with your veterinarian about. I'll tell you, one of my African greys, not Maureen, who's here, but my other African grey, Gigi, if my husband is drinking tea, she likes to come over and have a sip, and okay, one little sip's okay, but I don't really want her drinking coffee too much. But I mean, I have people tell me, hey, my bird drinks coffee every once in a while. Okay, you know, do we want him to do that all the time? No, I don't want him to do that all the time, but thank you for letting me know that, okay, yeah, maybe he's a little caffeinated every once in a while. Did he get caffeine today? Is he excited today from the caffeine? I don't know. But that's important, because what if the bird did drink more coffee than it's supposed to, and it could be contributing to whatever is going on with the bird. Okay, housing. Housing is, again, important for us to know, because I'm trying to like insert myself in your home and see what the environment is that your bird is living in, to make sure that the bird is, you know, having a good environment, that also there's nothing in the environment that may be dangerous in some way, or fear-inducing in some way, you know, something that could potentially be a problem. Making sure that we are having appropriate cage sizes and housing and all that for the individual bird that we're seeing. So we'll ask, you know, what type of cage does the bird have, or housing the bird has? Because some people don't have their birds in a cage, some people have them in an aviary, which is awesome. So, you know, what is it? Is it a cage? Is it an aviary? What's the size of it? And it's really funny, because the most common answer I have when I say, what's the size of the bird cage? The owners usually say, I don't know, it's a big one. And I think one time I had one owner tell me it's small. But other than that, like, hands down, probably like 90% of the time when I ask this question, it's a big one. And okay, well, what does big mean to you? You know, what is a big cage to you? I don't know, like, you and I probably have different definitions of what a big cage is, and that's okay. I'm just really looking more for like dimensions. So I often have to like redirect and go, okay, that's great that it's a big cage. What's the approximate dimensions? And I don't necessarily need to know like, oh, it's exactly 36 by 24 by 24. I mean, if you have that, beautiful. I love it, because then that gives me very, very specific you know, parameters of what the space is that this bird lives in. But sometimes we'll just have people kind of like mime it out. They'll be like, oh, okay, it's about this, you know, wide, this tall, so deep, and that's okay. That works. That helps me get an idea of what's going on. Approximations of, it's maybe about 2 feet wide by 4 feet tall. Okay, that works. I can deal with that. It's so much more detailed than going, it's a big cage, because there have been times where owners have said a big cage, and then they describe it to me, and I think, oh, I wouldn't have called that a big cage, but okay. You know, and again, it just goes back to, that's such a subjective thing. So being more objective with some level of dimensions is helpful. Location is also important. The reason location is important I think really is, well, many factors of why location is important. But I would say for a lot of like the behavioral cases that I see. So if somebody is coming in for like a behavioral consult, it's really important to know where is that cage located, because depending upon where in the home the cage is located, could be a significant factor in some of the behavioral problems that we see. If a bird doesn't feel secure or safe, or maybe sometimes if they feel way too secure and they're feeling like an area is perfect in a portion of the home where it makes them feel very nesty, well, then maybe that's a contributing factor to some of the behavioral stuff that may be walking through the doors. And so it may seem like such a minor thing of wherever you put the cage in your home is not something that the vet needs to know, but it can be really helpful, particularly with the behavioral cases that we'll see. The materials that the cage is made from. Now, the vast majority of the time, the answer is going to be some sort of metal, but I've gotten different answers from different people sometimes. And the materials that it's made from is just helpful for me to know, is there anything that I need to worry about as far as something that could be dangerous to the bird, anything that could potentially be toxic, anything that could potentially be something they could break out of, something that maybe they could overheat in, really just making sure that the safety of that individual is appropriate. And again, I want to emphasize the individual when I say that, because, not every bird does well in the same type of cage. Like the thought, going back to the size for a moment, the size, where we think about, oh, it's a big one. Everybody wants a big cage because it sounds nicer, I think. That, oh, this bird has this big cage that it lives in. We all want to live in a mansion. But you know what? Some birds don't want a big cage. Some birds want something smaller. Some birds are fearful when they're in a bigger cage, and that can cause some behavioral problems. So, it's really what's important for this individual, what is this individual's housing like in relation to everything that's going on, and why I'm seeing it as to whether or not that type of housing is appropriate for that individual. It may be perfect for some other individual, but maybe for this individual, we need to make some adjustments. What is inside the cage, is a good question too, or a question that's often asked, because I want to know, like, what kind of perches do you have? What sort of toys are in the cage and objects for the bird to interact with? Are there hiding places in the cage for the bird? And when we look at those perches, what kind of perches are they? Are they rope perches? Are they natural wood perches? Are they wooden dowel perches? Are they sand perches? Are they PVC piping? There's tons of different types of perches out there. And it's good to know because, sometimes we'll be seeing certain problems like on the feet. They may have bumblefoot sores or lesions, and knowing what kind of perching they're on is important to know whether or not, one, could the perching be a problem that's causing those sort of lesions, or no, it's not that the perching is the problem causing lesions, therefore, because the perching that is described is appropriate, and so we need to look down other routes of why we could be getting bumblefoot. Or two, if the perching doesn't sound appropriate, well then can we adjust it for the bird? Or can we do things to prevent problems? Because sometimes, during wellness visits, when we're asking all these exact same questions and the person's coming in with no problems, no complaints or issues, we want to prevent disease. We want to prevent problems. So knowing what kind of perches you have, I might be able to say, hey, maybe you have too much of this particular type, and maybe we want you to change to have a little bit more variety so you don't go on to develop bumblefoot problems or what have you. And then, is the cage inside or outside? Do they have the option to go outside? Like, can you move the cage outside, or does it always stay inside, or are they always outside? Like, where is it in the environment? And that's the importance of that is kind of vary, of course, based on where you live in the world, as to whether or not it's going to be appropriate for a cage to be outside versus inside all the time. Some places in the world, you're not obviously going to be able to put a cage safely outside all the time. Most places, are going to have periods where it's going to be okay for them to be outside, and periods where it's not going to be okay for them to be outside. So I just have this picture here of Arroyo climbing my green cheek conures cage, and this particular cage, currently in this picture, it's outside, because I have this particular cage, I can move it in and out. And Arroyo was just climbing the side of it. You can actually see I have like netting up above, because I actually, part of my backyard, I've sort of netted it off so that the birds can go safely outside. And we don't have to worry so much about aerial predators, I would say. So if somebody asked me this question, do your birds live inside or outside? I would say, well, my birds live inside, but I do take them outside with some frequency. I push the cages out there, or I take them out on tree stands so they can get some sunlight. And when am I doing it? What times of day? How hot is it? How cold is it? All that sort of stuff is helpful. Further stuff about the housing, more specifically focusing on the toys, because we know that these birds are extremely intelligent, right? Birds are so much smarter than I think we even truly know now. We've learned more about them. We've gained a ton of knowledge about how smart they are, but we still have a lot to learn. And giving them things to interact with, toys, objects, stuff to explore their environment is super important. And knowing what types of toys are helpful, because sometimes I'll have an owner say, yeah, I've got toys in there, but the bird doesn't play with any of the toys. Okay, well, what kind of toys do you have? Are these particular toys that your species may be more interested in? Maybe it's a toy that was labeled as a bird toy at the pet store. You picked it up and you put it in the bird cage and your bird has no interest. Well, maybe that particular bird toy isn't necessarily the appropriate size for your bird. Maybe you need a different toy that's more species appropriate, or just individual specific. We all don't like the same things, right? So we can't expect our birds to all like the same types of toys. Maybe one bird is more of an individual who's going to like to chew up cardboard, whereas another is going to be more interested in chewing up wood, versus another likes to play with like little plastic rings. They're all different. It's important for us to know what the materials are that the toys are made from, because again, just going back to safety, is it a toy that is actually going to be safe for the bird? Is it something that could potentially be a hazard? And I have had owners sometimes tell me certain toys that they offer their birds that I go, wow, I don't know that I would recommend offering that, because you could potentially run into a problem with that. You could potentially have something be toxic with that, or the bird could potentially hurt itself with that. Like, yeah, maybe it's been playing with it for a long time, it hasn't hurt itself and everything's been okay, but depending upon what it is, maybe we want to have them play with something else. Another important question is, amongst those toys, are there foraging toys? So are there toys that the bird has to break into to manipulate with its beak, manipulate with its feet to maybe get some reward on the inside, so that we're trying to simulate that behavior that they're doing in the wild of foraging around for food items and exploring them and finding them. In this picture here, this is Arroyo's cage inside, and you can see he's actively foraging in the picture. And I have a variety of different toys for him doing different things. He's got this is a bird specific toy, and it's just like little cardboard boxes, and there was some fluffy stuff on the inside, but he already destroyed it and crumpled it up a little bit, but I made him reuse it and put some other foraging stuff inside of there that he's actively foraging out of it. This little thing over here, it's just like little pieces of fiber, kind of like little fibrous things, that isn't necessarily a foraging toy, but it can be made a foraging toy. We can hide food inside of there. He's got some little wood that he can chew up back here. Here's another little bird toy that's on a little plastic chain with a little bell at the bottom, but then it's got some little wicker balls that also were foraging things. And you can see this one up here is like barely resembling a wicker ball at all. And that's because he just totally destroyed it. I mean, he just took it apart, and there's very little remains of it. And then I have something down here that's actually a human toy, a human child toy. It's just like a little cute Mickey Mouse toolbox, but I filled it with a bunch of foot toys. So like he can go and look in his little toy box there and pull out different toys, but I can also stuff those toys with foraging stuff if I want to, so we can kind of change it up a bit. And then he has a typical foraging toy, one that's like marketed as a foraging toy, that's a plastic foraging toy that I can hide food in. So, you know, having a variety of those things for them to interact with is great. But then again, the other question is, well, do they actually interact with the toys? Because some birds interact with their toys a lot, and some birds don't have a lot of interest. I mean, like Maureen here, she's not really into a lot of toys. Like I could put all these same toys, put Maureen in this exact same setup, and she like maybe would touch this little wood toy over here. Like she's not as interested in the variety. She likes wood. That's her thing. She wants to chew up wood. That's kind of it. And that's her, and that's okay. You know, every bird is different in what it is they enjoy. And sometimes with owners, if they tell me, well, my bird doesn't really like toys, then it's more of, I want to question and just go, well, you know, what do you offer them? What sort of enrichments do they have? Because like with Maureen, where I've tried lots of different toys with her and she's not super interested, I know that she's more into wood. So, okay, I'm going to focus on like wood items for her and not bother so much with some other things. And that's fine, but there's sometimes where owners or you know, I think too, I've become may look at some particular toy and be like, oh, they're going to love this. This is going to be perfect. And then they have no interest in it whatsoever. And I'm like, well, you know, I guess they just don't like toys. You know, you can kind of get yourself into that mindset really easily when maybe it's just that they need something different. And then of course, you know, are there things that they can interact with outside the cage? You know, are there things that maybe aren't necessarily bird toys specific, but they're toys in their mind? You know, to them, okay, this thing that's not necessarily a bird specific toy is still a toy, and what is it that they're interacting with? Because certain things that they can interact with outside the cage are fine to play with and fine and aren't going to cause any problems, and other things may cause problems. You know, I can tell you, I had a bird come in that would play with the like casings of gunshot like bullet things, you know, like the casings. And I was a little concerned, like maybe the bird really liked it, but maybe let's give him like a metal bell instead, that's stainless steel, just to be safer and maybe not have potential problems with injuring themselves or toxicities based on what it's made out of. So, you know, and the owners, they didn't think too much of anything of it. They were like, hey, let's play with this little metal thing. And, you know, it was just a good time to go, all right, well, you know, maybe let's not have him play with that metal thing. Let's have him play with some other metal thing that's just a little bit safer for him and still let him, you know, enjoy himself. Okay, so we went over the diet, we went over the housing, those are sort of the basics of just regular care, right? But now we need to get a little bit more involved and interested in, are they taking any medications and what is their health status that they've, you know, had throughout their life. So when I see a bird, you know, I may not be the first vet that this bird has ever seen. And so I want to ask, is this individual taking any medications? You know, because maybe another vet has seen it. Maybe this bird has a chronic problem, and it's been on a particular medication for several years. Or sometimes owners will get medications from over the counter. They may read something while they're waiting to come in. They may recognize a problem at home, and they go online or read in a book somewhere that, okay, here's this problem I'm seeing, it could be caused by this, I'm going to get this particular medication and try it out. And that's important for me to know. Like, did you already try antibiotics if we're worried about an infection? And if so, what type? You know, what was actually used? Because if we've already tried some particular medication and it's not working, well, then we don't want to try that medication again because it's already been tried, and let's not waste our time. Let's go on to something else that's going to be more likely to be helpful. So, and some birds may come in again with like chronic problems where there's like a laundry list of medications that they are currently taking. I want to know again what types those are. I want to know how often. How often do they get it? Is this a once daily? Is this a twice daily? Is it a 3 times daily? What have you? Once weekly? I want to know what the concentrations of the medications are. So one thing that I've had lots of owners do that's super helpful is take pictures of the medication vials before they come into the office. So that when I ask that question, what medications are they on? How much are they getting? What's the concentration? Then they can just pull up the little picture on their phone. Okay, here's the medication. This is the concentration of the medication. And oh, here's the volume that they're getting. And then I can make sure that it's an appropriate dose for the individual, that they haven't been underdosed or overdosed, that it's the accurate dosing that we want them to get, the volume that we want them to get. And then that last thing on there that I already kind of mentioned, are there any medications or supplements that have been tried prior to being seen? And I add supplements in there because that's important for us to know too. And so we actually have it as part of our like questioning with owners. Are there any medications the patient's on? And then, you know, they let us know yes or no. And then we ask, are there any supplements? Because a lot of times we think of, we humans, you know, will think of medications and supplements as different things. And a lot of times, I mean, they are different things. But supplements sometimes are used as medicinal for medicinal properties, you know. And so if we are using certain supplements for medicinal reasons, that's fine. I just want to know about them. For example, a real common supplement that's out there that's used for medicinal purposes is omega-3 fatty acids. So things like fish oil or flax seed oil. I actually prescribe those things quite frequently, or ask that owners start adding them to the diet for a variety of different health problems. But, you know, sometimes people also don't think like, okay, well, that fish oil, I'm thinking of it as a supplement. I'm not thinking of it as a medication. And they may forget to mention it when I say, okay, are we on any medications? Yeah, I'm on, you know, these particular medications. And then I may go later on, okay, well, I'd like you to maybe start using an omega-3 fatty acid. And then they go, oh, we're already on that. We're already doing it. I'm like, oh, well, you didn't tell me that. And then they're like, oh, you didn't ask, you know, it's because I didn't ask the supplement question. So it's really important that medications and supplements, like kind of think of them similar, I guess. And that way we have a you know, really well-rounded idea as a veterinarian what it is all that the bird is getting. Continuing on with previous medical problems, do they have any ongoing medical issues? You know, like, does this bird have a chronic disease, like liver disease? I see plenty of patients that come into the office, like maybe somebody lived in a different state and they had a, you know, great vet that they loved out in the state that they lived in, but now they moved out here and they're swapping vets. They already have a treatment plan that they've been doing for many years. They're on these medications and they just, you know, need me to pick up where their other vet had sort of left off. And it's really great for me to have those medical records from the other vet to know like the real details of how long a problem's been present, what all the problems are that have been present, previous blood work results, you know, it can be really helpful to have as part of our records. So if, you know, you do have records from another veterinarian, definitely bring them to the vet's office with you so that we can, you know, scan them, attach them to our computer system, have them set so that your bird has just a very complete medical record. Now, sometimes certain problems are not ongoing and they're just little problems. And it's important for us to know those too. Any small illnesses they've had in the past, if so, you know, what were those illnesses? When did they happen? How long? How long ago was it? What treatments were used previously and how did they respond? Did they do well with treatments? Were there any issues with treatments? Did they maybe not do well with a particular drug and maybe we need to like mark something in their chart that, hey, this individual doesn't do well with this medication? You know, this is a picture of Maureen here. And this was after she got into a little scuffle with my other gray, Gigi. And actually, when that happened, I think that was about 2 years ago, I had a webinar, I remember, like right after the incident, and Maureen was sitting over here in her little travel cage as my little hospital patient. But this is her in her little hospital patient garb. She has her collar on so that she couldn't pick at her bandages because she had to have bandages on her toes. And so, you know, if this sort of if I was to take Maureen to a vet, you know, I would want them to know that, yeah, you know, she had a little injury previously at one point in her life, she's healed from it, she did well, she was on these particular medications, everything went great. We didn't have any problems. She didn't like her collar. She chewed that. But beyond that, everything was good. That's important information for us to just get a full picture of what's going on with your bird. And then, okay, other things at home. Are there any other pets in the household? And if so, what are those other pets that are in the household? Are there other birds? And are those other birds acting sick or ill in some way? Do they have any problems? Because that's important for me to know, because I've had plenty of times where somebody brings in, one bird from a flock, and that one bird is kind of representing everybody in the flock. That, okay, this individual is kind of feeling really sick. There's other individuals at home that are feeling sick too. This one's feeling the worst. Let's figure out what's going on with this one, and maybe we can help this one to help the others at home. Or maybe I have a bird in the flock and it's just one bird in the flock that's having a problem. Well, okay, if there's only one bird in the flock that's having a problem, I'm going to think about different diseases over if everybody's having a problem. If everybody's having a problem, infectious diseases and toxicities are going to be very high on my list of possibilities, because when you have a group of animals affected with something, infections and toxins are the things that like to affect multiple individuals, as opposed to, certain problems like liver problems or cardiac disease are going to be more individualistic problems. The other question, any possible predators in the home? And I know that sounds kind of silly because we often don't think of our pets as predators, but we have to remember that dogs and cats are predators, and having a safe spot for our birds away from those other pets is really important. Even if we have really outstanding dogs and cats that don't have any interest in our pet birds, it's still really important that we provide a safe space away from those other animals for our birds, because our birds still know that those animals are predators. This is an example is my dog, and you can see Arroyo sitting up on this little chair, hanging out next to him. My dog's great with birds. He is, a very, very good dog. But I have to still recognize, even though he's a good dog and I don't anticipate any problems, and in fact, if the birds ever come up to him, he pretty much runs away, because he's like, that's okay, I know they bite and I don't want to be bitten. I still have to recognize that he's a predator, and Arroyo, who may seem comfortable in this photo, and that's fine because, he is mostly comfortable. There may be times where he could not be comfortable around him. He needs to have an ability to go to other places, to get away, to feel safe, to be higher up, to be able to not feel at all intimidated by my dog when my dog is around. And of course, there's certain dogs and cats who do have more of a predator instinct, and may be a little bit more antagonizing to our pet birds. And knowing about that is important, because, well, is this bird constantly being stressed out by this cat that's staring at it all the time, or dog that's like constantly, trying to get to it? If a bird is in a state of chronic stress, that's not going to be very nice for that individual, and could potentially cause it to become immunosuppressed. And when we're immunosuppressed, we're more prone to developing health problems, what have you. And then also, are there any recent changes in the home? Did you move to a new house? Maybe the bird's cage has stayed totally the same, but you moved into a new home. Or is there any new furniture? You wouldn't think about it sometimes, because we don't think about how our furniture and our setup sometimes affects the birds, but sometimes we may bring something into the home that the bird is terrified of, or just confused by. Any new guests? Has there been any new people? Any new roommates? Any new additions? Children, babies, or family members, elderly family members moving in. Our homes can be very dynamic. Is there anybody new that's around? And then also any new pets? Again, not even just our predators that we have to think about. What if you got a new bunny? What if the rabbit or the bird is, I don't know, really interested in seeing the bunny, or what have you? Just kind of knowing about all the other little ins and outs in the house, because I may not be able to come to a owner's home and necessarily see everything that's going on. Asking them all these questions really helps me to insert myself in their house, really get a good idea of what the environment is like, to see if there's anything with that that could be contributing to why the individual is ill, or things that we need to do now that it's developed an illness. Maybe we need to adjust certain things in the environment. Or again, for preventative purposes, we want to always prevent problems. So maybe there's some little thing that's not so major of a problem, but it could be a problem later on. So maybe let's adjust that thing so we don't have that becoming a problem and running into any issues. So a couple of just tips. Those are the main questions. I know it's a lot of questions. And I went into a lot of detail with them. Oftentimes when I'm doing these questions, I tend to ask these questions over like pretty rapid, maybe like 5 minutes. So it's pretty quick that we're going through them. And I think that's why sometimes maybe some people feel like they're interrogated because I'm just like, okay, well, what's the diet? What's the, supplements? I'm just going through things quickly. So just a couple of tips when you come to the vet. Think about all these questions ahead of time. I gave you a good list of things. Now, maybe your vet isn't going to ask every single last one of these questions. Maybe they already know some of the answers to these things. There's plenty of people that I have that I see them routinely and I go, okay, has anything changed? And that may be my main question, because I already know all the stuff that they've been doing. But think about these questions. That way you're prepared beforehand. Write down the brands of foods. There's many times that people say, well, I feed them this thing, but I can't remember the brand name. So writing it down or taking a picture of it. Taking pictures of the housing. I love that. When people do that, that's really helpful because then it's, a picture is worth 1,000 words, sometimes people say, right? It can really outline for me, like, okay, not only where in the house is it located? What's the size? What's the shape? What's the material? What are the toys? What are the perches? I mean, I can get so much information and a lot of those questions answered with just seeing a picture. And then another thing that's super helpful is write down your questions because you're coming to the vet with a problem, right? And you want that problem to be solved. And you probably have lots of questions about that problem. And if you write your questions down, then you won't forget them. I know when I go to the doctor, I may walk in and I have like 5 questions and then they ask me, do you have any questions? And I only remember 2 of the 5 that I had, because, they're asking me a question, all my thoughts are out the window. So writing those questions down is so appreciated. I mean, I've had plenty of clients who come in with a piece of paper and I see on their paper, like all the questions they're going to ask me. Great. I mean, I'm here to answer your questions. I'm here to help. Please ask away. And when you're prepared with those questions, so much better. All right, so now I would like to ask you guys if you guys have any questions.
Okay, let's see what we got here. I'm a big fan of photos too. I think that like you can see what like the bird in the cage, see if they've got enough space or right, like, and then just even if you don't know what brand of pellet, for example, like a picture of it, you probably will know. So it's like,
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And that's, it's funny. I've actually had people sometimes bring me like a picture of the food bowl. Like they just take a picture of the food bowl and they go, I don't know what the brand of pellets is. And I look at it and I'm like, oh, that's, whatever brand. So yeah.
or even like a maybe like a few days worth of your feeding so that you can get an idea of what portion sizes, right? Like just like a little slideshow of your bird's life. Like a little
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a question from Kate. How do you figure out optimum perch diameter size for your parrot? They know varied sizes are good, but it seems like their feet might be more comfortable on a specific size ratio of their feet for sleeping. So and they also want to know what your netting is made of. So
Okay. So the ratio that I was taught that's most comfortable is if they have their foot on like a perch, you want the foot to be covering 75% of the diameter of that perch. That's supposed to be like the comfortable position. Now, I mean, that's just like a generalization I can give you, but keep in mind it is a generalization because you may have certain birds who do like to be a little bit more flat-footed or some birds who may like to clamp a little bit more. So it really is recommended to have a good variety of perches so that they can choose what they want to be standing on. Because I mean, if they're in the wild, I mean, you think about them flying from one perch to another, to another, to another, they're going to be in contact with different diameters all the time. And even if they have the same roosting site, well, I mean, that tree that they're often living in, it may be a live tree. Sometimes they are roosting in dead trees, of course, too. But if it's a live tree, well, the tree's going to change over time, so because it's growing. So keep in mind variety is important, but if you are really specifically talking about what it is they're sleeping on and what's kind of comfortable, 75% the diameter covered by the foot is to be comfortable.
Okay. And then, are there painted children's toys like the Mickey Mouse tray that you that may not be safe for the birds to chew on, for them to chew?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the question of like dyes and things comes up. I get that question quite a lot. I will say I haven't ever that I've known had a dye in like toys or papers that I'm aware of cause problems. I mean, it's good to have dyes that are like color food safe dyes. Um, the big thing that we often worry about is like heavy metals, and you're not supposed to, like, paints in the US at this point don't have heavy metals in them. They were, outlawed like in the 70s or something like that. But if toys are manufactured outside of the US, there might be some different regulations. And so I guess there's always that possibility of heavy metal in different toys, where if it was manufactured in the US, there's that stipulation that prevents that from happening. So there, I would say that is a caveat, so using products that you are more known to be safe is going to be appropriate. So, but I will say there are certain things where I just don't know, but I haven't really seen the dyes so much be a problem. And I realize I also didn't answer the question of what is the netting made out of.
Yeah.
It's actually it's like a nylon thing, nylon netting. It is specifically bird netting. So yeah, that's the answer for that one.
Your neighbors must be like, does she have a zoo over there? Like,
I know when I was first putting it up, a couple of neighbors were watching me like, what's she doing over there?
Oh, that's awesome. We have a question from Frank. How can we increase the number of avian vets? Live in New Jersey in a dense population state, and the closest vet is 80 miles away.
Wow. It's something I would say we're working on all the time. I think everybody knows that there are not as many avian vets out there as there are dog and cat vets. That's a known thing. When people go into veterinary school, they go down the route that they want, like my hospital where I work, we have training programs, so we have interns, we have residents who are training, with the hopes that they stay on with or stay in the exotic pet industry, working with birds and other exotics as well. We also see students coming through all the time, and we encourage them to be excited and interested. And sometimes we get students who just want to see what bird medicine is like, but aren't too interested in it. And we can at least give them like a little bit of a foundation to say like, hey, here's some things that you could do to help somebody. Maybe it's not going to be all the in-depth, like really detailed stuff, but like even just knowing some of the basics to help people get by till they can get to somebody who does more birds. So I don't know, just encouraging veterinarians to step outside their comfort zone and try to help birds and learn more about them.
Okay. Yeah. And I mean, what instance would make like a virtual vet visit be okay? Like if you had obviously can't do like a blood, panel like or anything like that, or a X-ray.
Yeah, and I suspect that's something that'll happen more as time goes on. There was a period when COVID was more of a problem, when we were allowed in the state of, because I'm in Arizona, in the state of Arizona, we were allowed for a period to do virtual visits, and it was difficult, I have to say, and maybe it's just because I've been trained to like be there and touch the animal and feel it and look at it, and so I think virtual visits can have some of their limitations, but absolutely, I mean, if we're virtually in your home and able to see the cage and the setup and what's the bird doing in its environment, because they also act different when they come here, right? So there is some benefits to seeing the bird in its individual environment. So who knows, that will probably change more as the world goes on and may become much more common, and maybe we'll have another talk like this 10 years from now and it'll be a little different.
All right. That's the future. Okay. Well, Dr. Lamb, thank you so much. Again, fortunately, these are recorded webinars, so we don't have to worry about our notes. We got your fabulous slides and your voiceover, so you can always go back and rewatch these videos. These are like very helpful. I was going to announce today's winner of our giveaway, and that's going to be the strawberry Nutriberries, like strawberry flavored Nutriberries. Like that sounds really. I must be hungry because that sounds really good. And they're made with human grade strawberries. So there you go. Maybe you can have some with your bird. That is going to go out to Violet Hayes. Congratulations, Violet. You're going to receive that as well as another Lafeber product of your bird's choosing. And let's see. So I have. I'm going to give a sneak preview of what we have next Friday for our webinar. We're going to be, oh, wow. Okay. So next Friday, we're going to be on with, I'm sorry, there's a gardener outside. So if you can't hear me, Dr. Anthony Pilney, he's going to be talking about parrot confiscations and their welfare implications. So sorry, that's a mouthful for me. There we go. So come on next Friday for that. And then, oh my gosh. So, in September, they have the American Federation of Aviculture is coming to my part of the world. They're going to be in Orange County, California. So I'll be at the Lafeber booth doing that. And we have a very special guest. I'm not going to announce our guest yet, but she's going to be at the Lafeber booth on the Saturday portion of that. That's going to be the first weekend in September. So if you can make it over to California, Southern California in early September, stop on by the booth and Lafeber booth. It's one of the more popular booths at any conference you go to, by the way, from my experience.
At the Association of Avian Vets, it is a pretty popular booth. It's a great place to stop by. So I'm excited to see if who the special guest is in September.
I know where well maybe we'll unveil it prior to, but just to say it's someone very special. I'm very excited. And let's see. Oh yeah, because Lafeber is also going to be sponsoring the Family Fun Day. So yeah. So if you can make it to the AFA conference in September in Costa Mesa, California, make that on your calendar. So all right. On that note, I guess I'm going to wish everybody a wonderful weekend. All the best to you and your flock. Dr. Lamb, thanks again for joining us. And next time.
Thank you. All right.
Bye.
Bye.